Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please?
Hey there, travelers and lifelong learners. Welcome back to Nostalgic Travel Talks, where we believe that the best classrooms often come with a passport stamp. I'm your host, Cheryl Johnson, and today's episode is one you won't want to miss. We're diving deep into the heart of the Caribbean, not for a vacation, but for a life-changing academic journey. Joining me is the incredible Dr. Gigi Simmons, a physician whose path to becoming an MD included studying medicine in none other than Cuba. Yep, that Cuba, home of classic cars, mojitos, rich Afro-Caribbean culture, and one of the most unique medical education systems in the world. In this episode, we'll chat about what it's like to study medicine in a country with universal health care, how cultural immersion shaped her perspective as a doctor, and what we can all learn when we step outside our comfort zones and our borders. Whether you're a curious traveler, a future study abroad student, or just love a good story of grit and global perspective, you're in the right place. So grab a cafecito, or maybe even a mojito, and let's take off. We are here today with Dr. Gigi Simmons and her mom, Gigi Simmons. And Dr. Simmons has gone to medical school in Cuba. So let's start at the beginning. What led you to pursue medicine, and how did Cuba become a part of that journey?
Well, we'll start with what led me to pursue medicine. So initially, I didn't want to go into medicine. Most people who know my story knows that I wanted to be a nail tech when I was little. Yeah, I wanted, because I would go with my mom to get her nails done. And so I wanted to be a nail tech. I was like, that's what I want to do. And so when anybody would ask me that, I would say that. But my sophomore year in high school is when the movie John Q came out with Denzel Washington. And they had to perform the heart surgery on the little boy, and I just thought it was so cool. They were in the operating room, and the doctor touched his heart, and it started to beat, and I just thought it was like the coolest thing ever. And I was just like, I want to be the change. I want to be that doctor that would give him the heart and wouldn't charge any money. I want to be the change in medicine. So I was like, okay, I think this is what I want to do. I think I want to change over, become a doctor. So then that just led me to the pursuit, and I just kind of went from there. And then what led me to Cuba was actually I went to the Xavier University of Louisiana in New Orleans. And it's the only Black Catholic school on the Western Hemisphere. So we have it's founded by Catherine Drexel and the Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament. And so then, of course, we also have fathers on the campus. And this requirement for you to take theology. So actually one of the fathers came to me at lunchtime. And I was a senior, and he was just like, you still want to go to medical school? And I said, yes, I do. I didn't do well on MCAT. I figured I would probably do public health or a post-bac before I go into medical school. And he was like, oh, I can get you in next year. And I was just like, well, how are you going to do that? And he led me to the International Relations Office, which was interestingly in the music house right across from where I took medical Spanish. And I was also in the band at Xavier. And so I would pass the International Relations Office all the time. So I went there, and he told me that it was actually in Cuba. And I was like, what are you talking about? So I went to International Relations, and I talked to them, and they actually couldn't talk about it because of the embargo on Cuba by the United States. And we get government funding. So they were able to point me in the direction of the flyer. So there was a flyer that I passed all the time. It said, learn medicine for free in Spanish in Cuba. And I would pass all the time. I'm like, I'm not doing that. The free sounds great, but like in Spanish, they just sounds crazy to me. And that was the sign that he pointed me to. And it was for Escuela Latinoamericana de Medicina, also known as the Latin American School of Medicine. The scholarship was actually held in New York by an organization called Patriot for Peace, also known as IFCO. And it was just a phone number. And so I called, and it was just like, oh, well, where are you? And I'm like, oh, I'm graduating from Xavier. And I was like, I'm biology pre-med. And it was like, oh, you sound like you'd be a great candidate. And so this was a long time ago. They mailed me the application. So it was a written application. So it was mailed to me. I didn't have to take the MCAT. That wasn't a requirement. The requirement is just to have the prereqs for medical school. So I was already pre-med, so I had that going for me. And yes. And then the other requirement is that you have to take an HIV test and a pregnancy test. And so if all those work out, then that's how you get there. And so, I kind of submitted my application. My friend was going to come with me as well, but we had to submit a pregnancy test. Hers was positive, mine was negative. Oh. And I remember going to her room that day that she found out she was pregnant, and she was just like, I was like, you just messing up the plans. We supposed to go together. And she it was just like, well, I think that you should still go. And so she started her beautiful family. And actually, she is actually in public health. And I was just like, okay, well, I'll be the one to go to Cuba. And then with all of this whole story, the message from the father was not for me. It was actually for her. He was looking for her.
Oh, wow.
At the lunch table. And he was like, oh, where's your friend? And I was just like, oh, she's not here right now, but I'll tell her the message. And so when I told her, she was like, oh, yeah, we should definitely go. And I'm just like, I don't know about that. Like, free. I know it's free and I know medical school is expensive, but I'm like, I don't think that we need to do that. And she was like, no, I think that we should do it. And so, it was actually her who pushed for us to kind of go and get the information. So I definitely appreciate it. But, that message amazing. That was for her was actually for me.
That is amazing. Now I have to turn to your mom and ask, how did you feel about all of this when you found out?
Well, as soon as she told me, I was like, "Oh, that sounds great. You should do it." I didn't ask a lot of questions or anything. I just said you should do it because I'm a more of an adventure type person. And I trust her judgment, and I know that she is going to make the right decisions. So I had no qualms with it. Her dad, on the other hand, what did he say?
He said, hold on, I have questions. Pretty much he had 2 questions. Could I come back to the United States to practice? That was the main question. That was it. It was only that one question. Like, can I come back to practice in the U.S.? And when I told him that I could, he was like, oh. And that was it.
So that brings me to a question about the procedure. Do you have to spend a certain amount of time in Cuba after school, or you can go back right away after you were done?
No, you go back right away. And so that was actually one of the requirements for you to go back to your home country and practice in an underserved population, which is what I wanted to do anyway. But that's the only requirement. Cuba has so many doctors. Like, they don't need
so they didn't need any kind of reciprocity or anything like that.
And really, Fidel came up with the school or founded the school in order to serve other countries in disaster areas. So after the Hurricane Mitchell is when he decided, like, well, we're deploying all of our doctors to these areas, which we don't mind doing, and we actually want to share in this humanitarianism. But if we can train your own people to become doctors and serve in their own communities, that would be better. And so then that's when he said, okay, well, we're going to open up this school and give out these scholarships.
Okay. That isn't. So I'm just curious, if you wanted to stay, would there be a process for you to be able to?
It is. So can you really stay for long term? Not really. But I do have a friend who decided that she wasn't ready to come back to the States. And she did a fellowship in what we would call, it would kind of be like integrative medicine here. We called it, it's called Medicina General Integral, or MAE. And so that's pretty much their family doctor. And so they were able, it was actually 2 of them who were able to take the year in order to do that. So they were actually specialized in that. But then after that, they still had to come back home. So if you're not ready, you can stay. Some people have decided to actually stay, and they might go to another country that also has doctors from ELAM that are there.
Okay. That is really cool. What was the structure like? The pace, the environment?
So Cuba, in general, is very much, life is hard. We go to work, but we also enjoy life. So it's a balance. It's not necessarily too much of a rush. People are trying to rush, but you can't really rush that much there because of just how the structure is. So you're doing a lot of public transportation, or you're walking. It's a lot of bike riding, or they have motorcycles, especially outside of Havana. You can't catch a motorcycle for like a taxi in Havana, but mostly when you go to the other provinces is where you're mostly getting like a motorcycle taxi. So it's a hustle and bustle to it, but it's not that rapid pace that's here in the United States. It's very much, everyone has a job there. So everyone is employed. Everybody is getting a check, which is phenomenal. You have free schooling. You get what they call a mandao for food, which is kind of like just a small portion of food. Is it enough to maybe cover the whole family for the month? It's not, but it's a nice supplement. And it's usually rice, chicken, and some black beans that you might get a little bit of oil. At least when I was there, I know things have kind of changed. It's a lot harder now. So you would get that. You would could get some free clothing for school because everybody's wearing a uniform, and everyone is housed. So everyone has a house to go to. If you see anybody on the street, it's mostly by choice, or it could be something that's going on, and like with their mental health for the most part. So the pace is like, we're here and we're working, but we don't have to. So say if a store opens at 9 a.m., you might see people there at 9 a.m. Are they going to start working at 9 a.m.? Not really. You know, if someone's on the phone, you're going to wait for them to finish their phone call before your service. And it's just, I mean, that's just how it is. And he's
just a different culture.
It's a different culture. It's a different culture. Like, I'm here to help you. And I love, you know, my Cuban family is like bomb. I love them. Like, I just love being in Cuba in general because it's very helpful. It's a very helpful community and just society in general. Like, if you need something, they will help to direct you to where you need to go. If they have it, they'll give it to you, or they'll figure it out, you know, for you and help you out that way. So I love that. But just like the pace and how we do things here is just not the same way. They're very open and honest. Like, you know, if you fat, they'll call you fat on the street. You know, it's a hard adjustment, you know, because when I went to Cuba,
you don't mean like in a negative way, do you?
Not in a negative way, but in our culture and how we are here in the States, it's hurtful because we don't just go around calling people fat. Like, you know, that's just not a normal part. But, you know, when I was like 100 pounds heavier when I got to Cuba. I would say about 100. And so I knew that I would lose weight. They told me before I went, they were just like, well, you're probably going to bring your own uniforms because you're a bigger person. And we know that you're going to lose weight because it's a lot of walking. The food is different. It's just a different environment. It's more physical. You have to be mobile. And so when I first got there, I would get a lot of attention because first, I'm tall. You know, they can tell I'm American, like, you know, and I'm big. And so I would walk down the street and they'd be like, oh, gorda, gorda, gorda. And I'm just like, I'm just not used to being called fat all the time. It just brings back so many insecurities that you have. You build up this wall as being a bigger person of, you know, really protecting yourself and having kind of like a hard shell. But then it's always thrown in your face, like what your weight is. It just kind of takes you aback. But it would always be like, a gordita tan linda. Like, you know, it's always like, you big, but you pretty. So it's just like, we see your outside appearance and we know it, but you gorgeous, you beautiful type thing. So if you kind of take it from that context, and you have to kind of learn that, you have to build up to it. But when I first got there, it was very tough. Wow. To really hear that. And it just makes you very self-conscious. Like, okay, so everybody sees me here. You know, everybody's looking at me. Like, but it was an adjustment. It was an adjustment. But once I got adjusted, you know, I got a boyfriend, you know, I had a Cuban family. You know, it was just like, oh, you're cool. We good. You know.
Okay, so you stayed with a family, a host family?
No. So I stayed at the school. So the first 2 years are at the actual school. So you're actually at the school, and it's an old naval base. So you're off the water. It's in a place called Baracoa. So it's maybe like 30, 45 minutes outside of Havana. And you're there Monday through Friday. This campus is on lockdown. And then at Friday at noon is when you're able to leave. And that's where you kind of have pass to go here and there, wherever you want to go. And then it starts again on Monday. So in order to get off Monday through Friday, you had to have a pass. They had to know where you were going, which makes sense because you have all these international students. Cuba's responsible for us. So it makes sense. So we were there for the first 2 years, and that's where we did basic science. So I was there in school for 6.5 years. Because I took a half a year of Spanish, so 6 months. I knew how to read and write when I got there. The speaking and understanding is hard. Cuban Spanish is hard in general. It's very like fast.
I would agree.
It's very fast.
And they drop their S's, don't they?
They do. They drop their S's. They drop a lot of vowels. And it has a very much a sass to it. So, you know, it's hard to understand when people are talking to you and you're thrown right into the community. So like, you know, even on my first, so I did pre-med, which was the 6 months. I thought my Spanish was better than it was. It was not.
Oh, wow. Yeah, and we're talking about medical terms.
Yeah, we're talking about medical terms. So I started at the basic Spanish. Oh, it's not. First 6 months was pretty much, well, first 3 months were learning Spanish. So I learned Spanish in class I had one Belizean friend that was there. And then the Brasileños, so everyone from Brazil. So it's a lot of Portuñol, is what we call it. It's a little Portuguese Espanol mix. Oh, wow. For sure. Because we're all trying to learn, you know, we're there to speak Portuguese. And then in Belize, it is a lot of Spanish, but it's more of like Creole. So it's a lot of mix of languages going on in our class. But I was able to, you know, get the basics or get a little bit more confident. I was still very shy. By the time we went into what we call the second 3 months were of more pre-med classes. So I already did pre-med, so I finished my 4 years of undergrad. So that wasn't bad. I actually did better in those classes than I did when I was actually pre-med in the States. Oh, so it was interesting the second time around. And I think that Spanish just, because it's not my native tongue, then it just, you have to pay attention. And we had oral exams. every week. So you just prayed that your number wasn't called. But if it was called, you were made to stand up and you had to respond in Spanish. So I had to know what I was talking about. And I didn't want to embarrass myself, of course. So those were the first 2 years were there at the school. And the third year is when you go off into your clinical years. So we, as the American delegation, because they have each country broken into the delegations, we were sent to Havana. We stayed in Havana. We tried to leave. We wanted to go to Santiago de Cuba, which is beautiful. It's very cultural, very more like Afro-Cuban. It's a lot cleaner than Havana, and it's just beautiful. It was the capital, and before it moved into Havana. So we wanted to go there, but because we are Americans, they want to keep us all safe in one place. And Havana was the easiest way if something happened for us to get off. To get out. So we were made to stay in Havana, which was fine. And we went to Cerro, which is, it's kind of hood, it's like a hood. It's like a hood, it's the hood of Havana, of the city, and we stayed on campus at the hospital. It's called Salvador Allende, also known as La Covanonga, which it used to be like a wealthy kind of hospital before the revolution. And then afterwards, when Fidel redistributed everything, then it became, of course, open to the public. With the free healthcare. And so most of the Cubans know it as the Covanonga, but it was renamed Salvador Allende. So I was there from third year to my 6th year. So third year, you're learning just the art of medicine, of like patient encounters. You're actually in the hospital. So for 6 months, I did internal medicine. We're just like learning how to do physical exam, taking a history. And then the second half was more of differential diagnosis, how do you diagnose a patient. So that like the whole year of just doing internal medicine. And then we went off to do like P's, we did OB. And then our 5th year was like the electives. So like little ENT here and there, little surgery maybe. And then 6th year is like a intern year. So it's like a first year resident here in the States. And so the 6th year, you're on the front line. I'm doing overnights for 24 hours over in the Cuerpo de Guardia, or we would call it the emergency room here, whether it be for internal medicine or for surgery. And then also for the in Meiji, that talks about which is more kind of like their family medicine. We took turns there as well in what they would call like a policlinico. So it's like a big clinic, just like an urgent care. So we also do 24s there when we're on that rotation. And we would do that like every 3 to 4 days, I believe. I want to say it's more every 3 days to get that experience. So it's a lot.
It sounds
it's a full thing. It is a full experience, but the slower pace really helps you out to really get your skills, increase your skills, and just your comfortability with taking histories and doing physicals and really taking care of the patient.
Okay. So how long before you got to visit her?
Oh, gosh. The first time I went with an American delegation, which was organized by the program coordinator on the state side. So we went, and it was quite a few parents that went. And I was excited because we got a chance to meet with some of the politicians that were there. So, we were able to ask questions. We were able to tour the school. And one of my biggest questions was, because their crime rate there is like minimal, like almost non-existent. And so my biggest question was, how is your crime rate so low? And they said, well, we provide everything. So why would a person need to commit a crime? So that made me feel good as a parent because it was very clean. I felt safer there than I did in the city of Chicago because I worked in the city of Chicago at that time on the west side. And I felt safer there than I did in Chicago.
Wow.
So it made me feel good to be able to go home and know that she was okay. Now, the conditions were different, at the school. I have mad respect for her when I went to that first visit because she sacrificed 6.5 years of not having the luxuries of the United States. And, it was just different. And I had mad respect and have mad respect for her. And when I left, I said, whatever you ever want in life, I will give it to you because you have sacrificed these 6.5 years. So it was wonderful. It definitely was. And I think it was the best thing that ever could have happened for her. Just this well-rounded, medical training that she got, which is different from the United States. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, and to think like it's not just medicine. You're building bridges between, all these different communities. I don't know how about the other students there, but I mean, just the idea that you get to meet people from other parts of the world and maybe learn how different people live and learn to appreciate people more than you, because I've always felt that way about travel. Like you can't appreciate, I don't even know how to put it into words. You just can't appreciate. You got to step out of your own shoes every so often and find out what other people are going through and just to get a different perspective on something.
Yeah.
So
I was there with the world pretty much. So my year was the last year with all of the scholarships, because each country received 500 scholarships. And so it was the last year that everyone had used it up. So that was all of South America. So we had Brazil, Argentina, we had Chile, of course, Mexico. We had a lot of different Caribbean countries, some different African nations as well that were there, especially during that second. So what would be my second year is when it was more opened up to different countries in Africa, and then more of like the Caribbean countries were coming over. Because before it was more of just like the Latin American countries for the most part. So mostly a lot of just South America that was coming over. And so it was really cool to kind of just open it up and really have just these different mix of cultures. Like I'm still not into like football, or what we would call soccer. It's not like my biggest thing, but it's a joy to watch it in Cuba, and then also with all the different South American countries who are very just like
passionate.
They're passionate about it. I was there for that World Cup. It was during the time that I was there, and it was really cool to just see how each country battles against each other and just like the pride. And then also the first 2 years where they're mixed in with, because once we go into third year, we separate. So it's like the Americans, everybody knew that we stayed in Havana, and then Brazil will go to different provinces. So they go throughout the country. All the other countries do, except for us. And so it was just nice to just have that mix of, so we would have what we call galas. And so each country, you would put on a show. And so it was always, of course, it was always just like, oh, what are Americans going to do? You want to see what they're going to do. But my second year I participated in Brazil's gala, because they would just ask like, oh, would you like to come and do a traditional dance for Brazil? And I was like, oh yeah, I'll do it. And it was the dance from it was like a folklore type dance from Bahia, which I really want to go in Brazil, which I will go one day to Bahia, where it's just a large number of our African ancestors. That's where they were taken on during the slave trade. And so that's just like where you see like all the Black Brazilians and stuff. So it was just like an honor, like, oh, I get to do the dance from Bahia. Like, you hear so much about it. So that was really cool. And then we will also ask other countries to come and participate in our gala. And so it was just a nice cultural exchange. It will be a whole day. Like you cook in the beginning. So the beginning of the day, you like decorate your hall. You show like cultural, we don't really necessarily in America necessarily have like cultural dress, so like, other countries have like cultural garbs and their traditional dances. And so, we're a melting pot, which is, so we don't necessarily have that, but we did like our different cuisines. Like, we'd be like, oh, okay, we might have a little soul food. Or we also had, who are from Jamaican Americans, so it's just like they're coming in like, okay, we're making this. So that was a nice cultural exchange, and each country would do that during the day. And then at night was the gala, where you would do like your big presentation and everything. And my favorite one was actually our second year, and it was the Wizard of Oz.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
So we did. Wow. It was really cool. So I didn't know that I didn't know the Wizard of Oz was like the transition really from gold to money. So if you look at the yellow brick road, it's the gold. And then they're going, usually when you saw Oz, it was like green. So it's like a transition for it. And so we decided to like break Oz into like the different regions of the states. So we had like, of course, the East, the West, the South, and the Midwest. And so I was in charge of the Midwest part. And so I did Motown, of course, because why would I not?
Of course.
So we did Motown. So we started with like some Jackson 5, and then we had like a Cuban Michael Jackson, which was really cute. And then we did Rick James and Tina Marie, Fire and Desire, So we did that, and it was just really fun, to have that creative side. Not only are you here studying medicine, but you're also able to tap into that creativity. And it just really helps to make you very well-rounded. You're not just about just that one thing. Now, sometimes I wish medicine is what I know, and medicine is what I do. When you decide to go into medicine is like, it takes over everything that you know. and what you learn, and you really have to fight to be more into like other things like arts and politics and things of that sort. So that was, I feel like, a time in my life when I was able to really take in all of that and not just be all about medicine. Especially even with just being now, like residency takes over and you're just all about medicine, and then you become an attending. You're a grown up and you're still about it, and you're trying to fight to get back that, the other interests that you once loved. So I think that was it's definitely been one of the best times of my life.
Wow. I wouldn't have ever guessed that would have been part of your program. Yeah. That is just amazing.
Yeah, it was really fun. And I mean, if you look at the structure of ELAM, so here in the United States, we do 4 years of undergrad. Okay, so we were the old heads on the campus. We're coming in, I was like 23 when I went to Cuba. My other colleagues and stuff, they were like 16, 17.
Oh,
because when you look at the structure of education in other countries, they don't do an undergrad. Okay. They get their primary and secondary education. And then they test into a school, whatever profession that they want to go into. So they everyone had to take a test in order to say, like, okay, would this be a good fit for you? And if you scored high enough on the test, then they would send you over to Cuba. Now, in other countries, they had to go and do 2 years of service when they went back home for that. But, so it's different for us. But when you're starting like 16, 17, you're like in like your early 20s when you get nuts. So you still have all this energy, like you can set up these things if people in other countries wanted to specialize. Like I have a friend, she's Peruvian and she's in plastic surgery and like reconstructive surgery. And I think that she just made 30.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So like if you think about like the course, and she actually visited me in San Francisco, and she was doing a program there where she was also learning about reconstructive surgery and things of that sort. So she's done all of these things and had these different opportunities in this time where it's like you have the most energy. Because at 23, like I'm already did 4 years undergrad. Like, we tired. By the time people get into medical school, you're exhausted. You have been schooled like out. But I mean, if we did it at like 16, 17, how much energy did you have at 16, 17?
A lot more than I do now.
Exactly. And you just like a sponge. You're soaking up a lot of things. It's hard because could you imagine going straight from high school to Cuba?
That is, yeah. And I guess it probably takes a special kind of person, to be able to do that.
Exactly. And it's not for everybody.
And yeah, you're an example of one of those kind of people.
It's funny because my mom always says that. She's just like, well, you don't understand like how special it is. I'm just like, probably because I did it. And people ask her like, how did you even like do that? And I was like, I was young and ambitious. This was the option. It was just like, okay, we're going and we're getting this degree. If I can't do anything else, I know I can graduate from here. At least I will have an MD. I made provisions just in case residency didn't work out. So I, with our degree, you just had to buy what they would call like ASEOs, and they're like stickers to certify your degree in other countries. So I like did Spain. I was like, I might want to go and live in Spain. We could just take this degree on over there and just go ahead and settle there. And I want to say I might have did Canada. I can't remember. But yeah, so I went and bought those special stickers just in case.
That was a really good idea.
Yeah, exactly. Especially now. Right. Exactly. So it's still an option. They still would, my degree would still be valid over there with those stickers. So I mean, I just like, you got to make these provisions.
Well, you must be so proud of your daughter.
Oh, I'm extremely proud of her.
Because I mean,
I'm proud of her, and I'm proud of her as a person, not just as a doctor. Because first of all, she's always been focused. When she came home that day after her and her brother went to see John Q, it was funny because the first thing they asked is like, do we have HMO or PPO? Okay, that was the first thing. And then she decided she wanted to be a doctor. So I am just really proud of her. Even if she had been that gung-ho about being a nail technician. That would have been fine. I'm just proud of her and her ambition. She sets a goal. She's very focused, and when she went over to Cuba, I mean, yes, because how many people do you know that learn medicine in Spanish? So I mean,
I know one now.
It's like, so I am extremely, extremely proud of her, and just her ambition, her focus, her drive. She motivates me, so yes, to answer your question, I'm extremely proud of her.
Wow. That is impressive. This, before going into this interview, I'm just so surprised by so many things that I'm learning, This is amazing.
It's different. It was a different way of training and living, but I enjoy it, or I enjoyed it because it was more laxed. When you look at just the Cuban people, and even my attendings who were actually teaching me medicine there, really the doctors were, by the time I left, they were making like $20 a month. Oh. You know, and it's not that they're making like a ton of money. You know, they're not getting compensated what we would get compensated here in medicine. So they're like making a little bit more than what everyone else in the country is making. And that's when they had the tourist money, which was the say, which has recently changed. So a lot of my attendees would actually drive taxis on the weekend.
Oh my goodness.
Because that will make them more money than just doing medicine. But they do medicine because they love medicine. You know, they really enjoy it. But it's also very much like 9 to 5. Like, and then if you have to do what we say guardia, which is your on call, you do that on call and then you go about your life. Like you're not doing like notes at home or anything of that sort. People get off and you will go and live life and be a regular person. And I'm like, it's not a big deal to be a doctor in Cuba. Like, it's an accomplishment, but everybody's a doctor. Like somebody's cousin, sister, friend, like, you know, everyone is in medicine or they have some doctor in their family. And a lot of times, even when I would do my 24-hour call, a patient would come in and was like, well, yeah, I think I have this and that. And I'm just like, okay. I'm like, okay, well, tell me a little bit more about it. And then by the time they finish, I was just like, yeah, I mean, it actually kind of sounds like it's what you have. And just the art of just taking the history, which sometimes is lost, you know, because people don't want to read a narrative. But it's good to get the history on people. And my favorite part is the social history. I like to get all in people's business, you know. My friend's grandfather actually told me that I just wanted to be a doctor because I'm nosy. And he was absolutely right. Was absolutely right. Yeah, I am nosy. And then I decided that, I'm family medicine, I'm primary care. I like to say I treat from the womb to the tomb. And then I also do addiction medicine. So, I mean, these are the nosiest places that you can be, you know. And now I'm also working with Charles Drew. I went back to pretty much where I trained. So I did my family medicine at Charles Drew. I did my addiction medicine at UCSF. So I came back and I'm working with our family medicine residents, and I'm also working with the medical students. I mostly just kind of do lectures and stuff for them. But I just told they're now in their clerkship. So we're getting into our 3rd year. Because Drew's the new medical school. And so we're getting there and I'm like, this is the time for you to be as nosy as you want to be. You know, being in medicine, it's a privilege, you know, and it's definitely a privilege because your patients will tell you things that they haven't told anybody else. You know, some are just like waiting to come in and say like, oh, okay, well, let me tell you this, and that. Because really by law, you can't say anything. Right. And it's true, but it's just like, it's just the level of trust that I really try to have with my patients where I do want them to come in. Like I have a patient who likes to bring me Tubi recommendations, you know, and she had called for something. I called her back. She was like, oh, I'm making your list for Tubi right now. And I'm like, oh, okay, great. Thanks, you know. And I like to put those little things. She was actually mad at me because she said, I'm just mad. I was reading my note because, you know, the portal is open. You can read your notes. And she was like, I'm mad that you put that. I'm a Tubi enthusiast. And I was just like, but you are. But it's in my note because I like to have something that I can remember and ask you about when you come in, you know, so we can kind of have that connection. You know, even if I can't remember everything that's going on, I like to ask like, well, you know, how's your family doing? You know, how are your grandkids? Or, oh, you had that 50th birthday party. Like, how was that? So just having like that special touch. And that's a lot of things which you learn in Cuba. In Cuba, it's not a time limit for you to be with your patients. You can be with them as long as you want to. But you really have that, you just really want to develop that physician-patient relationship. And so that's one of the main important things that I've definitely learned.
Well, you know, when you say that, it makes me think about doctors that I've had and ones that I really like, as opposed to ones that I don't really enjoy. And I would agree with you, definitely. I can think of a doctor that you can tell he really cares when he's talking to you, and that he's making what's the word? It's not forced.
Yeah, it's like an effort. Like he's actually really interested.
He truly is interested. And then I remember that was when I was living in Milwaukee. But then when I moved out here, I went to another doctor, and I wasn't happy about having to leave my doctor. But I went to this other one, and he was just forcing it in a way, and you could just tell. So you're definitely on to something.
I mean, it is. It's a conversation, especially in primary care. Like you really have to develop that, especially if you're giving diagnosis. Like I had to give a diagnosis of breast cancer to one of my patients. I've had to also call that same person back and say like, oh, your pap was abnormal. So like you're and I told her too, I said, I feel like every time I talk to you, I'm giving you something bad. Like I'm so sorry, but I need to tell you so we can do the next steps. And she's doing fine, but I really don't need to see her. Like, she's in remission. She's doing well. And following up with the specialists and stuff. I don't have to see her that often, but I'm also only in clinic 1/2 day a week with my own primary care panel. And so I'm booked out 4 months. So I have to see everyone every 4 months. If I don't see you every 4 months, you're not going to make it back on my panel. You're not going to make it. And so, I have these closer follow-ups, and some of them are social visits, which are my favorites. Some days I have to set myself up really nice. Like every visit is a social visit. Like, you're just so stable. Like, just checking in. Those are great days. But then I also have patients who are, sicker, and I'm like calling them and asking about their hemoglobin A1Cs. Like, what's going on with your sugar? You sure you taking your medicine? Are you sure? Because you said that you taking it, but we went from a 7 to 11. It's something it's not adding up. So, it's those things. And I just think that the basis of my training in Cuba really prepared me to be this kind of doctor here.
Okay, that is wonderful. And it just makes me think about all my doctors that I've seen. And it's so funny because my daughters and I shared a doctor. And it was so funny how they had such a different experience from her than I had. And theirs wasn't that great. But so one of my daughters was like, I think it's ageism. And I was just like, it very well could be. And that's why I didn't see that side. So it's just, all these interesting things. You've shared with us so many interesting perspectives about medicine and all of the differences that I would say maybe some similarities and differences between our systems. So it is time for our rapid fire round. And I'm going to ask you a couple of questions and you can just give me your opinion. Okay. The first one, what's one Cuban medical phrase or term every med student should know?
Now, this one I could not think of. I could not at all. And I don't know why I'm just like blinking. I'm going through like my whole time there. I'm just like, I cannot think of it.
Should I skip this?
No, it's fine. But it's just like, I think because I've been practicing here for so long, that now everything is clouded by Spanish here. And that's why I can't think of it. Because I'm like, I can't think of anything, no phrase that I can. Okay. That I can remember.
No worries.
My friends, whoever's going to listen to this from ELAM, are going to be like, girl, it's so many. What are you doing? I started to phone a friend, but I didn't do it. I have a really good question for you. What is a classic Cuban dish that got you through med school? Oh, yeah. So this is a good question. I would say the pizzas.
Really?
It was like I love the liver. Now I will go to a specific house to get liver. They brand onions, and so every now and then
I think you're probably the only person in this world.
Exactly. When I tell people that, they're just like, what? And I was like, yes, I love liver and onions, and it would be this one house because everybody in the neighborhood around like Cerro, anywhere that you went, you could find what they would call this. Somewhat of like a particular, but it's just like a house that they're selling plates from. So I would go and get the liver and the onions with the rice, and it was always delicious. So that was a good time, but that wasn't all the time. But you could always depend on a Cuban pizza. So it's not like they're like the best pizzas ever. Some can be pretty doughy, some are a little bit thinner. But they're just homemade in somebody's house, and they would just go ahead and hook it up for you. And I enjoy the acaballo, and it has an egg on top. So it'd be like, so you have your cheese, a little bit of sauce, not too much sauce, because remember, we still haven't look, you have to save these resources. So you have a little bit of sauce, you have your cheese. Sometimes you can have usually some type of pork or something, and then you have like the egg on top. And so those my personal pan pizzas. If I was like running low on time or funds, you just go and get you a pizza. And it was a good time. Okay. Yeah.
Do you have any favorites when you visited Cuba?
God, I loved all the food because we stayed at this really good hotel. Because like I said, I went 3 times. And the first 2 times I went was during Thanksgiving. And so the students, I believe, cooked the meal. Or
church.
The church. Yeah. That's right. It was the church because I remember going there through the day, I think my second visit, and seeing them preparing to cook the food. And it was, if my mother had seen it, she would have had a fit because my mother was in food service, and it wasn't the most sanitary looking stuff because they would be like in the alley between houses doing stuff. But the food was really good. But one thing I remember is their yogurt.
Really?
Yes. Their yogurt did not taste like any yogurt here in the United States. And their coffee, Cubita coffee. Those are the two things. In fact, I bought Cubita back with me. I don't get that, rushed feeling, that heartbeat and all that, rapid heartbeat and all that stuff from their coffee. So the yogurt and the coffee were the things that I remember the most.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just hope one day I can go.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if that's going to be possible.
Yeah, you got to go.
Well, you speak Spanish. So
yeah, you be fine.
I do, but I mean, legally, how I want to figure out a way
Well,
now legally.
The legal loophole you would have to, I'm going to have to tell you how to get there, but...
Because when I went those 2 times, you couldn't go there legally.
Right, but
The
you
first
had
2
your
times.
daughter there, so that
Right,
made
that
it...
didn't make, well,
You could have,
right. But we did the workaround. But when I went the last time for her graduation, it was the first time that we could actually fly from Miami there. And that was one of the first times that anybody could, right? Yeah. Yeah, that was a big deal. So, I mean, we took over 30 something people there because it was all the parents, because the parents, got together and we organized a trip and we flew directly from Miami there. But yeah, it's definitely a place to go. It's a must on your list. It's beautiful. Oh, the Molly Comb. Oh my God. It's just the most beautiful
thinking
place
about it.
ever. Then you look at all the buildings and all the things. It's just historic. It's beautiful. Yeah.
You'll love it.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
You might not want to come back.
It sounds that way.
I know my son didn't want to.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to ask you one more rapid fire question. My rapid fire questions never are rapid fire, but that's okay. What was the biggest culture shock moment when you first arrived in Cuba?
I would have to say throwing the toilet paper into the garbage.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Because of the plumbing.
Yes.
No plumbing.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And so just becoming used to that of like, okay, whenever you clean yourself, you just throw it into the garbage can. And trying to figure out how to do that gracefully as well. So that was definitely a big culture shock. Also just like conserving water. So we have like buckets of water lined up just in case the water went out. And it actually did. My second year in ELAM in Baracoa, the water was out for like almost a week. So we're trying to conserve our bucket water, but then it just started to go down and it started to rain. And so we all just went out in the rain and showered. And that was...
Gotta do what you gotta do.
You gotta do what you gotta do. And it's definitely a you have to do what you have to do type of mentality to live there. And then I think the other thing is just being comfortable with being in the nude with other folks. Because I mean, it's not like we had individual rooms. One of the biggest rooms would have 14 beds in it.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and they were bunk beds. And so you just kind of get used to being around folks and changing or showering. Because one side of our showers didn't have dividers. It was just open. So we had one shower that actually had a curtain and it was divided off. And so Belize is more of a modest. They're more modest than what we are as Americans. And we also had some Brazilians that lived in our building as well. So they would fight for that. Mostly like our Belizean cohort. And we were not doing that because we need to get to class. And so I remember one time I went on the other side and it was like 3 or 4 people there. I said, do y'all mind if I just squeeze in here? And it's just like, drop them and let's get this bucket going. And that's just how we got ready. So just really kind of becoming comfortable in that. In like the bathroom situation, and that's the most part. I think that was more cultural.
It prepares you for anything, doesn't it?
Can I say something about that whole bathroom? My first visit, I went to her, we were doing a tour and I went on campus, and I don't know if it was her campus at that time, and it might have been one that she was going into, but I asked to use the bathroom. And so they were like, okay. So they took me to this bathroom and there was no lights. And it was like, oh my God, I felt like I wanted to cry because it was just so different, you know. And that was the day that I told her, you can have anything ever in the world, because just going to the bathroom was just a horrendous thing, because it was no lights, it was no flushing, water was dripping. It was pretty bad. Yeah. And you had to, you couldn't sit down.
Yeah. It's not a toilet seat or anything.
Yeah, and you had to take your toilet paper with you. Yeah, because we had our toilet paper. We traveled with our toilet paper. So that was at the school. And I was like, oh my God. Yeah, so that's why I say it was definitely a sacrifice. Yeah.
For sure.
People always often think like, oh, well, you were living good. Or they'll think that ELAM is more of an offshore, and it's not an offshore school, it's international. So offshore, mostly, if you're doing offshore medical school, a lot of times you'll do the first 2 years in the country, in the host country, and then you'll come back and do like your rotations in the States.
Oh, okay.
So for Cuba, it's the whole 6 years is there. And they were just like, oh, well, you're American, you were living. I was just like, no, I had a carnet, which is like the identification card, with all of my information, just like Cubans, and I lived the lifestyle, like even if I wasn't living on campus, I was living like in the renting and like what they would call a particular. Once I got my boyfriend, we moved in together, or I moved in with him because he had the housing. So I moved in with him. So he was like, I'm living this life, like going to the grocery store where we would like the agros, which would be kind of like our farmer's market, so I'm going there, I'm taking the bus, I'm also in the morning running with the boy Abuelita, like trying to catch the bus and stuff like that, and them up showing me, and I'm just like, so that's the life they live. I'm also doing the hitchhiking and trying to get to where I need to go, as well. So I mean, I live just like the folks, I live just like the Cubans, and that's why I still say like, oh, I have a Cuban family. So, I need to get back out there to see them, and I know they're talking about me, but they're my folks, I'm gonna get out there and see them. But I still know what's going on and keep in contact with them. And they're my people.
Wonderful. And to think this all started because of John Q.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank goodness for John Q. That was an amazing movie too, by the way. I think it probably, I remember watching it and thinking, wow, this should be like in the curriculum or something. And it should be a lesson for how we should do better.
And we should. Prevention is key. That's why I would tell everybody prevention is key.
Absolutely. Yes. Well, I want to thank you both for joining me on this episode, and maybe we'll get together again and do a second episode, a follow-up.
Oh, yeah, that would be great.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you both. Wow, what an inspiring conversation. Huge thanks to Dr. Gigi Simmons for sharing not only her medical journey, but also how studying in Cuba broadened her worldview in powerful ways. I also want to thank Gigi's mom for sharing her experiences with us and sharing what it's like to navigate this journey as a parent. This is exactly what we're about here at Nostalgic Travel. Travel that teaches, challenges, and transforms. If today's episode has you thinking about how travel can enhance your personal or professional path, let's connect. Head to nostalgictravelco.com for group trips, cultural experiences, and immersive journeys that go beyond the tourist brochure. And hey, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, or share this episode with someone who dreams of learning through travel. Thank you for tuning in to Nostalgic Travel Talks. I hope today's episode inspired you to dive deeper into your next journey. Until next time, keep exploring and keep making those unforgettable travel memories.